Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. I'll be delighted to hand over to Philip. I know most of you know him well. He represents and has created the DNA of our fair, and I have the great privilege of working with him. As head of vetting when it started, he's been our chairman ever since, and is an extraordinary expert in many fields, and obviously an important collector in his own right. Today he's joined by Ming-Zheng Veneau, who is also a collector, somebody who is a close friend of the fair, having spent many years representing mallets in Asia and living in New York and Hong Kong, now advises Chinese museums and private individuals on the collecting of Western art. So I'd like to hand over to Philip to talk about the extraordinary objects that we have this year. Philip.
Lucy, thank you very much for that. And I would like to add my welcome to you all for what is going to be an informal conversation between Ming-Zheng and myself, looking at, I think, 11 works that are very much our personal choice. We are both lovers of the decorative arts, traditional decorative arts perhaps, but I also wanted us to make connections between the traditional and the contemporary, and to really underline my strong feeling that there should be no distinction between contemporary and traditional painting, sculpture, and works of art, and really that all works of art should be judged by their beauty, their integrity of design, and their use of materials, whatever age they might be. I mean, there are terrible examples of 18th century furniture and earlier works of art and marvelous ones, and vice versa. I mean, there's terrible contemporary design and fabulous contemporary design, and this applies to all periods. And I think one of the things that we do at Masterpiece so well through our exhibitors is to sieve this, to represent a real cross-collecting multidisciplinary ethos of the best works of art available. I think we should kick off swiftly with the first of our selection. And Ming-Zheng, would you like perhaps to start off with telling us a little about these rather wonderful chairs?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Greeting from Hong Kong. I love this pair of chairs because they are very special. Let me tell you why they are special. As a person who is interested in East and West cultural exchange, nothing is more representative than this pair of a chair. If you look at the style, it is quintessential English style, Georgian, would you say? And look at the carving on the top with a acanthus leaf centered with the shell, and supported with the cabriole legs with the claw and the ball feet. It's very much Giles Grande, which is very fashionable in the 18th century, and mostly this type of English furniture were made by walnut. So why this is special? Because this pair chair actually were made in China, not in England. And how come an English style furniture made in China in the early 18th century? That is something to do with the East India Company. As we know, the East India Company were trading with China starting in the 17th century. And during the trading seasons, many of the officers stationed in Canton, and most likely a chair like this would be commissioned by the officers. Either they brought a prototype of chair, of course, in walnut, or provided a sketch to Chinese craftsmen, and they made accordingly. But the Chinese craftsmen didn't use the walnut. They used a high-grade hardwood. And in my opinion, the hardwood would be much better than the walnut. I will tell you a little story relating to a chair like this. In 2013, also at the Master Fair, the year, each year, Master Fair has the object of the year. And that year was a set of 12 chairs, just like these. And it was exhibited by the eminent gallery Mallet. It took 25 years for the Mallet to collect a set of 12 such chairs. And I had my client in China fly over to London, especially for this set of chair. After 15 minutes, he stepped into the Masterpiece Fair. He bought the whole set. He was not only intrigued by the Chinese elements in these chairs, but also he fell in love with the English design ever since. And now this set of chair of 12 is exhibited in the Chinese private museum in Shanghai.
Ming-Zheng, so, can we have the picture of the 12 chairs, do you think?
Yes, next slide, please. So on the left, these 6 chairs is a part of that set, which in the setting of the museum now in China. And you look, they are quite comparable. And I think when you combine 2 elements properly, the English, the Chinese here, the East and the West, just like the city I'm living now in Hong Kong, English administration with Chinese working ethic, it came out to the greatest city in the world. So this pair of chair embodies also the fusion of 2 artistic ingenuity. And that is why I think they are very, very special.
If I can step in, Ming-Zheng, here to add perhaps another further element about these chairs. I mean, the cross-cultural influences are always so absolutely fascinating to explore. But as Ming-Zheng said, these chairs are very much influenced by an English model of chair by the famed cabinet maker Giles Grundy. And if you have time to meander through our website, at some point after this talk, you will see that one of our exhibitors, Godson and Coles, has an extraordinary single chair of this model, but made in England, but japanned in scarlet Japan to look like a Chinese decorated chair. And this was part of a large set of furniture that was made for the Duke of Infantado for his palace in Spain, which was one of the largest furniture commissions in London in the early 18th century. Let us move on, Ming-Zheng, shall we, to the second of our
the
choices.
Chandelier.
This is a rather extraordinary chandelier made in Berlin porcelain and gilt bronze. There were a small number of these made for Frederick the Great in the 1760s, 1770s, for his extraordinary palace, the Neues Palais in Potsdam, in Sanssouci. And this really epitomizes Rococo form. So mid-18th century love for the sea scroll, the curves, shell work, the really animated, movemented moment of design, influenced both from Oriental Chinese designs, and particularly, but also from European scrollworks and flowers and naturalistic decoration. And this, I think, is a remarkable example, surmounted at the top by a pineapple, symbol of welcome. And what I really like about this is, and I have not been as well prepared as Ming-Zheng and can't find the comparative slide, but there is a contemporary sculptor, designer, who, Ingo Maurer, who really takes this combination of porcelain and gilt bronze to a different height by smashing white porcelain plates and turning them into the most marvelous chandeliers. And for any of you who've been in the last few years to Waddesdon Manor, Lord Rothschild's house, which now belongs to the National Trust, you will see in the dining room there an absolutely astonishing chandelier. So this is one of those objects that to me has inspired a contemporary work and really makes the threads. The continuity of design, the continuity of thought is endless, and design doesn't stop and start. And I think finding and tracing these links, whether these stylistic links, is really, really exciting. And one should always keep one's eyes wide open to this. Ming-Zheng, I don't know whether you have anything you would like to add about this, which I think you find a slightly puzzling choice of mine.
Well, I found a connection. The previous object is about the China export. In this object, I see some chinoiserie elements, especially the letters, if you see the letters and the palm leaf, and I think also the pineapple, it's all a little bit represented the East. But of course, as you said, it's a Rococo, so it's a very much overall a Western. So there's a East and the West elements together, but instead of China export, it is a chinoiserie kind of elements in it. That's how I see it.
You're absolutely right. I think it's a wonderfully exuberant, lively piece. And I believe there's one in the Rijksmuseum, which actually is also partially colored. The links, I just find it really fascinating, the links with this. And I think the next piece that we're going to show, which is a contemporary work, again, demonstrates these extraordinary links that go back and forth always when looking at works of art. This is a piece by Matt Collishaw, a British artist, made in 2014. The central panel is a liquid crystal screen, and it is based on a painting by Caravaggio in the Borghese Gallery of David with the head of Goliath. And he has very carefully animated this extraordinarily ghost-like meditative interpretation of this picture, and he has put it in a black Murano glass frame in high Baroque style, completely echoing late 17th century European giltwood mirrors. He himself was hands-on involved, which to me is really important with any contemporary art, difficult with video and so on. But to me, the imprimatur, the involvement of the artist, for me personally, is absolutely a crucial element of any piece of contemporary art. And so to see, as you can see a video of this on YouTube, and you can see him in the Murano glassworks working with the glass blowers to produce the screen. The video is back projected through mirrors, which gives us this additional, rather extraordinary, as I said, meditative, shimmering appearance. And what I really love about this is this dialogue between the artists with this incredible contemporary work, but completely looped in to looking at old master pictures and sculptures. And this, in fact, was one of a series of 4, which was installed in the Borghese Gallery in Rome, where the 4 different pictures that he used actually hang. I find myself captivated by this. And Ming-Zheng, I don't know if you have any sort of thoughts and so on you could add to this. And,
yes, I think I would like to point, as we look at the image, it's a still, but in reality, it's actually animated. And as a audience, you actually feel you are part of that movement when you look at it, and that is very intriguing. I think that the artist, the idea is want to engage the audience. When you look at a painting, you are part of that story.
It isn't, and it's you know, the stories are so important, but you know the incredible high quality of everything. I mean, the video is absolutely superbly produced. and technically really rather extraordinary, and the caliber of the making and the design of the frame. And I think whatever period any work of art is, you know, the quality outs, and is the make or break between a you know, perfectly okay work of art and a really great work of art.
Yeah,
I think
one
as
has to
saying,
experience it, right?
yeah, absolutely. It's very large scale.
Mm.
We're in Rome, so I think our next slide takes us equally into the heart of Rome.
Yes, Rome, my favorite city. Oh, but before that, I would like to point out that the chairs we talked about was dated 1735, and this painting is dated 1734. That makes them contemporary almost. So one is English Chinese, and this is Rome. What we're looking at is the Pantheon, one of the greatest buildings in the world, in my opinion. I still remember 25 years ago when I first experienced the Pantheon. I was taken there by a Roman friend, and he blindfolded me until he positioned me in the very center of the space. Then he asked me to look up, and I opened my eyes. I couldn't believe it. I still remember that overwhelming sensation when I see the beam of the light shining through the oculus. So ever since then, every time I go to Rome, I have to go visit it. And every time I go there, I feel the excitement like a child. So when I see this painting, I was just like, I absolutely love it. Well, a little bit about the Pantheon. It was built by Hadrian in the 2nd century to worship the pagan gods. And it's also called the Temple of All Gods. The coffered dome remains to this day the largest unreinforced the dome. It's 43 meters, as the same as the height of the dome. And the cross of the oculus is about 10 meters. So Pantheon was the highlight of antique Rome for the grand tourists in the 18th century. And the painter is Bernini, the most celebrated and popular view painter of his day. So many grand tour tourists, especially English, commissioned him to paint as a souvenir for their tour. So can we see the next slides? Thank you. I found a comparable painting in the National Gallery in Washington, D.C. As you see, they look quite similar, and they are exactly same size. The only difference is that if you look at the figures in the front, they are slightly different. And in our painting, I counted there were 46 figures, and they were monks, prayers, women of fashion, and the English my lord. So in the very center, maybe this is a little too small, but in the very center, there's a gentleman in a blue coat. That is believed the Englishman who commissioned this painting, and his name is William Hobbage. So this painting has a very good provenance because we know exactly when it started and how it came to now the gallery. Well, if you, again, the image is small, but if you look carefully, there's a very discrete difference between these two paintings is the viewpoint. So look straight in the center to the front door, and on the left side, you will see actually the fountain in the Piazza della Rotonda. But on our painting, the view is a little bit to the left, so you don't see the fountain. So that's a small difference. However, the bigger difference is you see the lighting coming from the oculus. In the left painting, the lighting from the light, we know it is about 3 p.m. At the time. So from that, I would think the one we look at on the right is about 11:10 a.m. Shining from the east side because the door is facing north. So actually Panini made several versions of this kind of painting, and the other one is in the Cleveland Museum. Okay, Philip, what maybe you can add on some.
Really fascinating, and I didn't know about the blue figure being Holbeach, which I absolutely love. I think that's a wonderful piece of information. I mean, like Ming-Zheng, I'm passionate about Rome, and I was there, I think, in January this year, and I can highly recommend it to anybody who is there when it is pouring with rain. And I was there in a real downpour, a thunderstorm, and standing not quite in the middle of the floor, with the rain pouring through the oculus, and the whole floor, which is slightly convex, completely came to life, because as those of you who know me a little will know, I'm absolutely passionate about colored stones and marbles, and the floor of the Pantheon is a real high spot of these incredible hard stone inlaid floors with huge panels of different colored marbles, which come alight when they're wet. And it looked absolutely remarkable. So it's the best place in Rome to go when it's wet. You can also, as I'm sure you know, get the best coffee in Rome.
Yeah, I try to imagine. I try to imagine when it's snowing day, you're standing there and see the snowflakes coming into. That'll be amazing.
Really beautiful. Of course, it looks very different now as it did in antiquity. The coffering, which is incredibly subtly tapered up to the oculus, was in fact lined with bronze, and the whole of the sort of clear story beneath the coffering was panelled in coloured marbles. And I think being here and being in Rome, the centre of classical antiquity, full of astonishing antique Roman sculpture and so on, leads us possibly quite neatly into the next work that I have selected, slightly, I think, to Ming-Zheng's horror. But it's to me, this is one of my favourite things. And it's by a Chilean artist who lives in New York, called Sebastián Errázuriz. And this was made 2 years ago. It is called Buffet Frieze. The frieze, I think, jokingly referring to the arrest of time. It is obviously based on a classical Roman sarcophagus front, but it's sort of focused because if you imagine, if you zoomed into a Roman sarcophagus, you wouldn't have seen this. This is a detail of a front. And he is obsessed with stealing, a word that he uses, stealing classical sculpture. And really, I think he means more by that, capturing the essence of classical sculpture and turning it into something very modern. This is, again, to me, rather like the Collage, an incredibly interesting mixture of art, technical virtuosity, and design. And in fact, is made out of a composite marble, a sort of modern version of scagliola, where ground up marble dust is mixed into a paste. And I just find, again, it's one of those objects which looks forward and looks back. It keeps us in touch, and it makes us think about something other than which it actually is. I don't know whether, since the last couple of days you had time to think a little bit and look a little bit more at this piece, whether you have
Yes,
anything to
I'm
add.
trying very hard to understand the story of the frieze. It looks, is there something about war or it's very in a Roman style, is it?
Yes, it's a battle scene. And what I don't know is a really interesting point. I don't know whether he must, and I don't know which, he must have taken the detail of this, the design of this, from the front of a Roman 1st or 2nd century sarcophagus representing a battle scene. But I don't know which sarcophagus he's used. And now you provoke me to go and find out. So I will do so at some point during the day.
Okay.
Onwards, we move on to this, one of your favorite pieces here.
Oh, yes, the simplicity of that. Well, first, it has a very difficult name. I believe it's called a Cycladic, because it's a Greek name. So there's a variation of the pronunciation. So it's called a Cycladic female figure or statue. Can we have the next slides, please? Yes, on the left, I took this picture about 2 years ago when I was in Louvre in the Greek gallery. They are almost exactly the same. So I thought it's quite interesting to compare them. When I first saw such a statue, what struck me is that, wow, they look like contemporary art. I don't know what it is. It's a 5,000 years old object, but they look like a contemporary art. It must be the abstractness, is it, Philip? What do you think? Does it look old or new to you? Since we were just talking about old and new.
Well, I think to me what's interesting, when I first started coming across Cycladic art, or it came into my consciousness, I was sort of rather dismissive, I have to say. But it's a moment that I've really grown to like. And these figures are a little bit of a mystery. Nobody actually knows what they were for. They are almost exceptionally female figures. And a suggestion is that they were perhaps fertility goddesses. And I believe that quite a lot have been found perhaps used as for ritual purposes with their heads broken off. I think nobody knows quite what they are. I don't know whether you have any deeper information than I do, Ming-Zheng, on that.
Well, first the Cycladic means there's a Cyclad island centered around the sacred island called Delos in the Aegean Sea. And so Cycladic and the Mycenaean and the Ionian are the three Bronze Age civilizations in the region. And so that's as I said, it's 5,000 years old. It's around 3000 BC and very, very, very old. What I know is that the Cycladic statues come in three kind of categories. One is the female bodies that we see, and some are the male body. And the third category is rather rare, is the musician. So as you said, we don't know exactly what they are for, whether it's a goddess or as a burial. But if they are as a goddess, like a fertility goddess, they are rather flat body compared to the same period as a prehistoric culture. The goddess normally they are much more round and plump. So that, I think, the flatness and the geometricness makes they are very distinct. And I, for some reason, I just love this kind of simple look. Cycladic, even it's a very small category of art, there is actually a museum in Athens. It's dedicated to such art. And I would very much like to visit that museum next time in Athens.
Absolutely. I think just to add perhaps a tiny bit more from a slightly different angle, I think that the clarity of their drawing and the simplicity, which is not quite as simple as one might imagine, is very appealing to current taste, and I think was one of the reasons why they've become so, there's been such an interest in them. But these were very much collected by travelers in the 19th century and brought back to other parts of Europe. And they served hugely to influence early 20th century contemporary paintings. If you look at Brancusi, Modigliani, totally, completely influenced by Cycladic art. And again, the links, the story, I think this is enormously interesting to follow through. I think it's that their simplicity, the beautifully stylized forms, and the proportions are wonderfully well balanced. And I think, again, this toing and froing, which we've seen in one or two of the other things we've looked at today, and we see with almost every work of art, to be fair, is interesting.
So they normally claim the size from 8 centimeter to life size 1.5 meter, so varies. And do you know, it's actually was painted originally. You know, what we see now, it's all no color is left, but originally the eyes were painted, and also there's some decoration. As we know, these are female bodies, so they wore a necklace or as the ornaments, they were all painted. But after so many years, the paint is gone. Only the marble stays.
I think that's really interesting to remember. And of course, nowadays, what we admire, and I suspect we would admire the painted original version in a different way, but is the marvelous patina and the sort of incrustations on the surface that to us, I think is very much the sort of modern sensibility.
Correct. Yes. Yes.
Shall we move on?
Yes.
This is one of my personal favorites in the fair. It's an incredibly rare object. It's a celestial sphere. It's French. It dates from the middle of the 16th century. It is one of, I think, a very small number, I think 4 of these clockwork celestial globes based on the series of Ptolemy. It really marks a high spot, to me, a high spot of Renaissance ingenuity. That's not how I look at it. I mean, the ingenuity is fabulous and fascinating and really interesting. It's a mechanical instrument. To me, this totally transcends its practical mechanical function of telling us how to look at the skies and to make all one's judgments about everything one learns from the skies, about crops and seasons and so on. To me, this has turned into an object of great beauty. It's a great work of art. The quality of the decoration, the engraving, and the patina on the worked copper of the globe is really superb. And I think, again, to me, this was an area that I never really used to look at scientific instruments. A bit like, and I really, once you start to look, they become really fascinating, and these works really transcend what they are. They're truly great works of art, made for scholar connoisseurs. They would have been incredibly expensive. You would have kept them in your small cabinet in your house or your palace, and they mark real apogee of Renaissance design and ingenuity. But I just think it's a really beautiful object.
Philip, I just wondering how big actually it is. It's a cabinet size, or is it actually?
It is. You know, I'm not actually. I think it's about 24 inches, but I can't swear to that. So it's not like a huge, Regency floor globe or whatever. This is something you would have had on your desk.
Relatively small. I see. Yes.
In the same way that you would have had, in your studiolo, you'd been surrounded by Renaissance bronzes and all sorts of wonderful treatises and so on. So a real educated, Roman gentleman's collection, it would appear in, I think, and this was, as I say, however, made in France, but it's very, very, one would expect to see it in that sort of surrounding.
Yes.
The next object we have is, I know, one of Ming Chang's most favorite pieces, but it's also one of my favorite pieces.
Okay.
Why don't you start?
Well, we share the love of Rome, Roman antiquity, I guess. Well, this image is so iconic. I'm sure everyone probably have seen it somewhere. So it's called the Plymouth Dove, this image. The original piece is in the Capitoline Museum. If you ever visit the Capitoline Museum, look for it. It's a plaque rather than a box, but the center is this image. Whether it's a box or plaque, it's have exact image with 4 doves nested on this very refined bowl. One dove is drinking the water, while the other 3 look around as if they are sunning leisurely. They look really realistic, and while the box is actually made in the late 18th century, as I said, the original copy, the plaque in the Capitoline Museum was discovered in the Hadrian Villa in Tivoli. At the time, people thought that's the original, but there's another saying is that the real original, this image is the lost ancient Greek mosaic at the Pergamon made by Sosus. We don't have the real...
Sorry to interrupt.
Yes?
I think we have an image of the antique one, do we not?
Oh, right. Yes. Next one. Thank you for reminding me. Yes, the left is from the Capitoline Museum, as I said, in the plaque. So why we call it Plymouth Dove? Because the original Greek version is lost, and we only knew about it because the Pyramid Elder in his natural history mentioned this mosaic image. His natural history was written in 77 AD, I believe. So this again, it's very representative of the antiquity, and it was very fashionable in 18th and the 19th centuries. People made a copy on a box such like this. Many museums around the world, say Vienna and the Met, they all have similar objects. But other than objects, I think the box itself is made by, which I believe, Philip, you are expert on such a material. So I let you talk about that material.
Thank you for that, Ming Chang. Yes, I'm particularly interested in all these stones. And the body of the box is made out of imperial Egyptian porphyry, which comes from the Eastern Egyptian desert, and is the most prized of all these colored stones, reserved initially for use by Roman emperors, and then taken up as a material of power, really by the Byzantine emperors and then by the Christian Church. And all these objects that you see made in the 17th and 18th century out of this material are made out of reused, found pieces of porphyry, whether it's old columns or pieces of porphyry flooring that have been pulled up and so on. The quarries were lost in the 5th century. So it's an incredibly rare stone, a really beautiful stone, and much used at this time for making these objects, which were, I think, really produced rather like the Panini slightly earlier for tourists to Rome to buy and to take home as souvenirs.
Yes.
But it's particularly beautiful.
Well, if I may, again, I would like to talk about my own experience. My very first time to encounter such image was actually in the Fanfili, Palazzo Fanfili in Rome, instead of the Capitoline Museum. So next time in Rome, you need to go to both places to look for them.
I think that's exactly when also just worth pointing out with the original, or possibly not quite original, the second version, as it were, of the image. What's really worth looking at when you see it is if you go up to the Capitoline, you go up the stairs in the right-hand block, and it's on the landing on the left at the top. The border is absolutely fantastic. The border is in micro mosaic of the most unbelievable quality. A really, really beautiful object. Memories. We all have memories, so let's move on to the next. And perhaps I start off, Ming-Zheng, with this, and then perhaps you can add. This is a work done by a contemporary ceramicist, sculptor called Boek de Vries. They were made this year, and it's called A Pair of Memory Vessels. He's a Netherlandish artist, and he really concentrates on these exploded works, reclaiming broken pots after their accidental damage. I mean, he's not breaking original works of art in order to recreate his. He is using found objects in a way. And he refers to his works as the beauty of destruction. And so he's really giving new life to a broken object. And I think that's really, really interesting. And these vases are Japanese, and they are, actually, am I right, Ming-Zheng? Are they Japanese, or are they Delft imitating Japanese?
No, I think this one is Japanese, Akita, 17th century. And it's called Yule. It's a stranger name. But you are right about Delft. It got very popular. Delft made many copies of that.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, he has made, blown a contemporary glass version of the original, into which he must have blown it around the broken pieces. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, you wouldn't have been able to get them in. So, I mean, that itself is
a good point.
Technical tour de force.
Yes.
And what I think is interesting, I've been in another talk that I've been I was doing yesterday. We were talking about space and how space actually is really important to understanding an object. And I think with his works, of which there are I think 2 others which you will be able to see on our Masterpiece website, the space around the broken object is almost as important as a broken object, as it were, itself. And I think it's always worth looking at things with in that way, and not just looking at the object in itself, but seeing how it sits in its surroundings. I find these rather fascinating and rather beautiful, linked together by a gold chain, and the one on the right, which again is a broken vase, has been glued together, and as you find very much is a sensibility with Chinese porcelain, which is often mended with gold fill, as it were, so as to preserve the original piece. So I think all sorts of cross-cultural and time resonances this, which I absolutely love.
Yes, we actually have next slides related to this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which I found it's the same shape, and also again it's a Japanese, and I found it actually from the Museum Groningen in Holland. I mean, that explains why the Delft. It's all the connection between Japan and Holland. At that time, Dutch Indian Company imported many of blue and white. So that's one of the pieces.
Wonderful. I just wanted to say before we move on to the next one, we have just 2 more works to talk to you about. And it would be lovely if you would start perhaps thinking a little bit about any questions you might have, which we of course would be delighted to answer very shortly. The next image is a pair of rather extraordinary earrings, which are made by Cindy Chow, the art jewel, who is an extraordinary Taiwanese jeweler with a sense of esprit about her work, technological imagination and knowledge almost unsurpassed, I would go so far as saying. The way her jewels are actually made, the gold work is all, the gold framework, for example, is all made in the lost wax tradition, like a Renaissance bronze. And her use of unusual colored stones is, I think, unrivaled. It's very difficult with jewelry on the screen because you need to be wearing it and to see how it moves and how it reflects the light and so on and so forth. Her work is very much based on nature, but by physical location particularly. So these are called Cameron Falls, and I think 2 years ago she was in Alberta in Canada, where the Cameron Falls are, and she has taken these fabulously colored stones, the pink pearl particularly, to echo the falls. Now, I thought this was rather bizarre. So actually the other day I Googled the Cameron Falls, which I'd never bothered to do before. And every now and again, due to the iron oxides upstream from the falls, it has been a particularly giant rainstorm, the falls turn pink. So here you have a pair of earrings completely based on cascading water in these falls, echoing the pink color of the water, the diamonds, the splashes, and put together on this beautiful naturalistic twiggy framework. I just think they're objects. Well, they're objects, I said it. They are earrings, but they transcend objects. They are wonderful, beautiful sculptures. Would you wear them, Ming-Zheng?
I would love to have them on.
Sorry, we couldn't arrange it.
Well, next year, hopefully, when we are walking in the fair.
Absolutely. And I think they're really, 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 really beautiful. And I think, again,
the color is amazing.
Yes, but I just go slightly back to thinking, you know, there are lots of works of art that I suspect a lot of us don't think we're interested in looking at. But once you start to look, once you start to learn about the design, the materials, the influences, how hard it is to make them, how incredibly difficult it was to source the materials, a whole new world comes alight. And I found that with jewelry. I personally found it with arms and armor, and as I alluded to earlier, with scientific instruments. And so, I mean, look at everything. I mean, don't not look at things because you think it's a category that you don't like, and try and approach these works from a different angle, which might possibly apply to our next and our last image for some.
Okay.
Do you want to start with these, Ming-Zheng?
Yes. Well, the title says a green porphyry. So my question was, sometimes the image could distort the color, and I don't know whether you actually have seen the green porphyry. Is it actually green, or it's a little bit darkish? Or...
Well, I know the objects well, and I know the material reasonably well.
Tell us about it.
And there is, as you rightly say, quite a lot of black in it, but they are definitely green. This it has to be said, which lessens them not at all, is a porphyry found in France, in the Vosges, where in the late 18th century, the French designers, particularly under Duc d'Aumont, were tasked to finding local materials to use and not to rely so much on importing these incredible colored stones, in particular from Rome, for use in French luxury goods, French decorative arts. And so a lot of quarries were opened from the 1770s onwards, and there was a big production using French stones. In my slanted view, the green porphyry that comes from Egypt, which is incredibly rare and is very different from this, it has a greener tinge, but it's a really rare stone and a very beautiful stone, and epitomizes contemporary works of art of the moment.
Yeah, and the gilded mounting, I think that is a very important part of this object. I understand it is done by Pierre Gaultier, who is probably the best the craftsman in Paris at the time. My understanding is he worked for the Louis XVI and had many commissions from the Marie Antoinette. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the mounting.
Yes, the gilt bronze mounts, as you rightly say, are absolutely superb. They have their original gilding. They are mercury gilt as opposed to electro gilded. So the gold leaf is applied to the bronze in an amalgam and heated noxiously, giving off really, really toxic fumes. But it gives this extraordinary mellow color to the surface of these highly chiseled bronze mounts. And there was a fabulous exhibition in the Frick the year before last, pioneering exhibition by Charlotte Vignon en Gouttière. She's now at Serres, and the exhibition was also in the Musée des Arts Décoratifs, if anybody's interested to explore that further. But there was this tremendous taste for really richly decorated, luxurious objects, particularly in the second half of the 18th century in Paris. And you would go to one of the Marchands Mercier, one of the people who specialized in selling these luxury goods, whether it was furniture or porcelain or cane handles or snuff. And the taste for mounted hardstones and mounted porcelain, imported porcelains very much from China and Japan, were mounted in this way. And I think it's really important to look at these as contemporary works of art, which of course they were at one point, and one forgets that.
I understand in Wallace's collections, there's a clock called the Avignon clock. It's also done by him, and it's exquisite.
Yes, the Wallace collection, of course, for those of us in London, is a wonderful place to go and look at this type of works of art.
Right.
But to me, this is the best combination. I mean, they're beautifully designed, extraordinary rare materials in the stone, and the really highest quality of gilt bronze work. I mean, they unite to form, in my view, rather timeless objects. If you look at them in your mind's eye, strip the mounts away, you've got a very contemporary design underneath.
Right. I won't mind to have them in my living room.
Well, I believe they're available, Ming-Zheng, if you're up for it. And,
okay.
I think that brings us sort of to the end of our tour of our highlights. And
Pleasure.
I hope you've enjoyed today, and I hope you will visit our fair online and allow for this wonderful serendipity of engagement with the wide variety of extraordinary works of art that our exhibitors have brought to us this year. Thank you.